nothing will be left underneath the tarp except good black soil. So it's a great way to clean up your beds without using the rotor tiller. Generally speaking, these tarps, we'll leave them for from 2 to 4 weeks depending on temperature. If it's really warm in the summer, it's going to go a lot faster to decompose the organic matter. If you're in the fall or in the spring, you might need to plan for more time, at least 4 weeks. It really depends on what's underneath the tarp and how warm it is above ground. What we're doing here and what's so different about our farm is that because of the land limitation that we had when we started the farm, we had a 2-acre prairie that we had to manage to make it viable for both my wife and I to have decent salaries coming out of it. So first of all, we wanted to have the crops spaced as close as possible so to have more yields per acres. Trying to have the leaves of the crop touch one another at 3/4 of their growth. When you do that, you get a canopy. And that's really key to the success of the biologically intensive cropping systems. You have this canopy that not only shades out the weeds, it also retains the moisture and it creates a habitat that is really helpful for all of the biological life that's inside your soil. So instead of having these cropping system, which, it seems like you're growing soil because that's all you see, you have these permanent beds of densely seeded crops quickly forming a canopy. The rest of the game is to get organic matter content risen and get good soil structure so that the root systems, they can really shoot down and not compete with one another for nutrients and for water availability. You'll be more efficient in most of the chores that you'll be doing on the farm. This is a bed of carrot, 5 rows on 30 inch. If you're spacing them, 1 row and then you're leaving 20 or 30 inch, 1 row like a typical mechanical setup is, trying to imagine when you're covering your rows with row cover or insect net. So we're using 5 times less space to grow the exact same number of crops. That means that I use 1/5 of the same material to do the same job. It's going to cost me 1/5 of the price, but most importantly, I'm going to cover my crops 5 times faster. An increment of 5 when you're farming on a small scale makes a lot of difference. When you're harvesting, when you're cultivating your soil, the fact that you've intensified makes you more efficient. And that's really the secret to successful market gardening. So here we're ready to transplant some lettuces. And usually on the permanent beds, the way we go about preparing their seed beds is we'll use the broad fork and also the power harrow on the BCS walk-behind tractor. I understand though that not everyone is going to get a big power harrow or such a big power unit for their market garden or their urban farm. So a nice alternative to that is simply to use a wheel hoe. Once you've opened up the soil with the broad fork, you'll put your amendments in and then you're just going to mix everything up, tilting the soil with a wheel hoe. The wheel hoe will prepare the soil so all of the crop residues or the weeds that are popping up will be destroyed, and then you'll be ready to rake the soil and transplant your crops into the ground. We've prepared the seed bed really nicely. Now we're getting ready to transplant, and it's important to mark the rows. So to mark the rows, we use these interchangeable plastic tubes that we simply fit on the tine of the bed prep rake. And depending on if you're doing 4 rows, 3 rows, 2 rows, you can easily change them. So today I'm doing lettuces. So this is 3 rows. You go like this, and we'll mark our rows.
The goal here is not to have perfectly straight lines, but to maintain equal distance between the rows. This will greatly simplify the job when you come back to cultivate with tools such as the stirrup hose. Once you've marked your rows along the length of the bed, you can easily mark plant spacings by using the rake in the other direction. Before you transplant, you'll want to make sure both your plants and the soil are wet enough. This is important for rapid root uptake. We water the cell flats thoroughly before transplanting, and unless the soil's already wet, we also water the beds, at least along the rows where we'll plant.
When you're doing intensive spacings, then there's a lot of transplant per square foot. You want to be doing this as efficiently as possible. It's all a question of diminishing each gestures to save seconds here and there. I've did the grid line, so that's a great start. We don't need to be thinking about our spacing anymore. You'll take your plant, take your 2 fingers, put it in the ground, boom, and then move on to the next one. A lot of people, they spend too much time is to make holes and then put it on and then go like this and that. And then I just take twice as much time to do the same task. And multiply these seconds by the number of plants that you need to put in the ground, it makes a difference.
It's critical to keep the ground moist for the next few days following transplanting. If plant roots don't have enough water at this stage, the crop will be fragile for the rest of its life.
So we're in Norton climate here. So what we've done is that we've put a caterpillar tunnel over here, and that allows us to transplant these nice lettuce heads really early on. Now that the weather is much warmer, we want to move the tunnel once more and bring it onto the solanaceas, tomatoes, eggplants, and bell peppers, which will be really happy with the extra heat in the middle of the season. One technical detail with these caterpillar tunnel is the importance of having both beginning arches really anchored down well. To add the rigidity, what we do is that we put 2 crossbars that will hold the 3 first arches together, and that will solidify the whole structure. The other point that is interesting is these hooks. You can slide them in, slide them out really easily, and then when you want to open your tunnel, you'll just slip the plastic onto the hook, and that will give you the opening. When you're ready to close it down, you just slip it back in, and then the plastic will go all the way down.
Caterpillar tunnels can easily be taken down and reassembled in a different location by 2 people in a couple of hours. They're a great way to extend your season in the spring and in the fall, and can be moved 2 or 3 times a year to follow your crop rotation.
These caterpillar tunnels, you want them to be really short when it's the spring and there's heavy winds. But when comes summertime and we're growing tomatoes, bell peppers, and eggplants, we really appreciate the fact that we have more height. So what we do is we have these extenders that we put in the middle of the summer, and then in the fall, again, when we have crops that are shorter crops, we'll remove them and we'll have a smaller caterpillar tunnel. Now we find ourselves inside the caterpillar tunnel, ready to transplant the nightshade for the summer. We need to make sure that both the plant and the hole are really wet. So we'll take our plants. The clump and the hole needs to be firmly pressed in one another so that there's no air pocket left between the two. At the end of the process, the soil should be level with that of the clump. Firmly press it into the soil, and then we're good to go. Every time we have crops that are 100 days or more, like the nightshades, we want to have landscape fabric that's covering the soil. That helps for weeds, and it also helps for water retention. And so, since we're always using the same spacings, we've made holes in these landscape fabrics, and these guys should last a lifetime. To make the hole, we have different sizes according to different plants, and it's pretty easy. We burn a hole in the landscape fabric using a blowtorch. Any discussion about direct seeding should start by telling you that for all of the crops that we can do inside and transplant in the field, we prefer to do that. Transplanting and starting your seedlings inside the greenhouse guarantees that you'll have good germination rates, uniformity when you're transplanting, but also it allows you to have more lag time with your successions. When the seedlings are in the greenhouse, they don't occupy bed space. This being said, there's a lot of crops that you can't do with transplants. You need to be drop seeding them in the garden. When we started market gardening, we would do this by hand. I remember Modelaine, she would be really fast and just go at it, rolling the seeds one by one, dropping them by hand. Then eventually we learned about these precision seeders that made our life so much easier. If you want to be successful as a market gardener, you need to adopt these precision seeders to use them correctly and properly to get both the singulation of the seeds and the proper spacings on the row. One of the key elements when using these precision seeders is to have a clean bed. You need to make sure that your soil is level, firmed, and all of the debris, rocks, weeds, whatever, are removed, making sure that your seeder won't jam when you're using it in the soil. Also, you need to make sure that the soil is dry enough. As a general rule of thumb, if you're taking up soil and it's not forming a sticky ball, then you're ready to go and you won't be clogging your seeder that way. The second thing is that you want to make sure that you're measuring your densities to make sure that you're putting enough or not too much of the seeds that you're dropping. I do this by measuring with a scale the weight of the seeds in my package before I seed. Then after I've finished seeding, I'm going to measure the package again, and then that's going to give me how much seeds have been dropped in the ground. I have with me targets that I've measured over years, and since all of our beds are 100 feet long, it was pretty easy to figure out, let's say 4 rows of carrots on 30 inch, I wanted to have 20 ounces of seeds for optimal spacings. So I have targets for all of my crops, and then I compare what I've just done with my targets. If I've put too many seeds in the ground, I can adjust my seeders, and if I haven't put enough, then I'm not gonna wait 3 weeks to figure it out, and then I can just do another pass with the seeder. I'd rather put more seeds into the ground and thin them than have holes on the bed.
At the farm, we use different hand-push seeders depending on which crop we're seeding. The Swiss-made Glazer seeder is simple and well designed. It can be adjusted for 3 different seed sizes, and we find that it generally works well for small seeds, particularly round ones. It doesn't bury the seeds, so you have to come back with a rake to finish the job. The soil must also be really firm and level to get good results with this seeder. The Earthway seeder is a push-type seeder which drops the seeds into a furrow created by an adjustable opening shoe. Earthway offers several plates for different seed size or spacings. It works well for beans, peas, or radishes, but it's a lot less effective with smaller round seeds. The 6-row seeder is designed for intensive seeding, and we use it for our mesclun salad mix. After 2 passes over a 30-inch bed, one up and one back down, you'll have dispersed seeds densely enough to cover the bed effectively, shading out potential weeds. We also use the Korean-made Jang seeder, which we like a lot. The seeding mechanism is more precise and more flexible when it comes to spacing. The shoe is also heavier, which means we can use it on bed surfaces that aren't as clean or uniform. This said, it's also longer to calibrate, and it's much more expensive than both the Glazer and the Earthway combined. The depth of planting will affect both germination and emergence rate. In general, seeds should be planted at a depth equal to their thickness, but always double check with your seed supplier.
A great time and space